trying to make sure it's working this time. So you basically just this is the beginning of a new video, but basically you just lost like the 15 minutes of the most inspiring shit you've probably ever heard about CS:GO. Fortunately for you, fortunately for you, I still have the guest here. So with me is Mauisnake, and he's like one. I suppose you put him as an upcoming player in the tier 2 scene of NA. Played in ESEA, MDL, was a leader, was an opper, but is going back more into content, YouTube content, like specifically, I'd imagine like breaking down CS:GO analytically. Also does some analytical work for Thorn on the side, as far as I know, right? Sound about right?
I did do that for a while, and I'm kind of in I'm trying to get back in correspondence with him. It's kind of weird, actually.
Yeah, it's like it's a lot of things going on, a lot of juggling parts, right? So
I'm doing a lot of caster work too, actually, right now. That's why I was at Fragadelphia. I was just doing caster work for them. So,
yeah. Okay. So basically, the point of this podcast is because I wanted to ask him about playbook analysis. How does a team construct a T side or a CT side? And we're going to start off with how a team like breaks down a particular map, like whether it's like tactical or like a loose playing style. And before the restart, basically we're talking about overpass, right? So let's break it down. Basically, how would a team begin to make a playbook for like a map like overpass?
Okay, so the way that I used to break it down with my team is all prior teams actually, is that I would always start with a default to make sure that players were comfortable with where they were at the beginning of a round. And what usually is great about a default is that if you're just strictly better than a team, you can just default against them over and over again and win matches. So if you have a really comfortable default that you're okay with running and you're better than the team, there's no reason to not just keep running that over and over again. So you, one, don't have to chance kind of running into them counter-stratting you or something like that. And it's two, you also aren't revealing strats for potentially other opponents who may begin to anti-strat you in the future. They won't see all the executes and ways you get map control the same way if you do that against them.
Yeah, so like an example would be like Old Fnatic from like 2015. Like they defaulted a lot, but it just happens they're the best team in the world, so you can't really do anything about it. Or the SK with Phelps. Feels like that's the version. It's like they just default and beat the shit out of everybody, right? And so the question I was asking you before I realized we were actually not recording was like basically if you're in a default in a 5v5 scenario, you lose a guy, and then now you're in a 4v5 scenario. So the example I bring up last time was like Taco during the Luminosity Gaming / SK lineup with FNX. On overpass specifically, if they lost a guy along with last guy in mid, Taco would immediately counter aggress on his side of the map, either pushing up monster or pushing to the B site, trying to get a pick, trying to get information. And so I wanted to ask you, is that like a specific like directive from Fallen to Taco, you have to go do this in this particular situation? Or is that like Taco's own mindset on the game? Is like, okay, so theoretically if they lose a player here, I'm the only one that can get information? Or is it like a combination of the two?
So it's definitely a combination of the two, but in one sense, what I likened it to before is that a CT side, if you lose a player on one side of the map that you find essential, it's integral to your success later in that round to get some information or a pick. So Taco might not be doing it in the safest way possible, especially if he's doing this by himself, but it does give his team information that, hey, there might only be 2 people on B at the time, because a lot of teams switch up whether they're running a 3A or a 3B setup on overpass. And Taco's information, if he can find that one pick and find out if there's 2 more or only 1 more person at B, that's really going to help them out with the round, especially with how good Fallen is at mid-rounding and how SK is good at playing off of defaults such as that. So,
All right, so I guess we could talk about actually, there's one more thing I want to ask before we get there. Is do leaders or do teams generally plan out like a 3v3 scenario or lower, like small man scenarios? Because I feel like it's super chaotic in those scenarios, so you have to kind of wing it. But there are like cases I can think of, like Gambit when they were very good, or certainly like current Astralis, like their small man scenarios are super structured in a sense where like it's pretty clear they know what to do in any given situation. But I'm not certain if that's because of like they've planned it all out or just because they've had so much experience together. There's teamwork and chemistry going on between like the players and the rules and their understanding of how to play CS.
I can't speak for every team, but I know that certain teams, I know that some of the old Stanislaw teams, I would watch a lot of his demos before because he had really good strats all over the place. He would have man down strategies in specific. So one of the strategies that he used on Overpass, to bring it back to that, is that if his team went to a man down situation, there's this wall of smokes that you can throw at A, where you throw like left side default, right side default, and then truck. He made a different one where he only needs 2 smokes, and he just throws it between default and truck, and then anyone that's running up to the bomb site will clear the close right area, but then everyone else is just posted on that left gap, and that's just a set strat that they have if they do find themselves in a 3v3. It works for them really well. So I had a couple of those when I was playing and calling. I would come up with I would just call them man down strats, and then that's pretty much all we would do. If the situation doesn't seem like that would work, or I look around at my teammates' utility and I notice we don't have those kind of nades, sometimes we'll have just really we would do on the fly pop flash plays or just contact plays. That's kind of all you can do at some points. You could try to run fakes, but if they have a man advantage on you, that's not usually going to accomplish a lot unless your solo faker guy or however many players you send to fake actually get
skills.
Get one or more kills.
Or
and it's almost like at that point you should have just probably gone to that bomb site that he was going to anyways, because if he's getting kills and you're succeeding with that, why didn't you just have all of your players go with him?
Yeah, like that. Yeah, like the old Mauisnake tactic. Nico fakes by himself, kills 4 people. Why don't you just go with Nico?
There's no reason to not just go with them at that point.
Yeah. Right. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. But how does that differ from like a let's call it like a loose map like Mirage or Dust 2? Though I'm not like Dust 2 still. I'm not necessarily certain it's a loose map yet.
I would actually go as far to say it's not. I think the playbook for Dust 2 is a little smaller than other maps, but there's still, we talked about this before in the recording, is that there's still a lot of ways to get sectional map control on a map like Dust 2. For example, it's been the play forever is that to get long A control late, you usually have to throw 2 smokes to kind of isolate the pit area away from the plat area and the car area, and then you throw chain flashes over as your teammates run out, and then they just clear the whole long A area. And you can do that at any point in the round, very beginning, later. I mean, not too late obviously, because then you can't get to the bomb site in time. But there's ways to get cat control as well. There's ways to get the mid to B control. There's a lot of ways to get map control on Dust 2 that implies more than just running and gunning. I think Mirage is probably the loosest map.
Yeah. So Mirage would probably be the best choice, right?
Yeah. One of my old teammates and I that I really bounce a lot of ideas off of and I can talk to really well. We both kind of talked about how Mirage is probably the best pug map, just because it's so it just really gives a lot to individual fighters across the map, and usually you actually have to respect the fact that all of these fights, whether it's B apartments, A palace, A ramp, mid, underpass, all these fights, if no one on CT, if no one on CT is taking account of that, like let's say you're doing an aggressive mid play on Mirage, but you only have one guy at B and then one guy at A by himself, it's like the one guy at A can easily get overwhelmed because it's just too easy for people to default out and spread out and just find those openings. So people are really good at responding on that map at this point individually.
Yeah, so basically it's also why like it's probably FaZe's best map. It's just cause, or like Mau's old best map, just because the individuals, just the way the map is spread out, there's a lot more room for people to get a lot more room and a lot more space for everybody to get kills, right? A lot. All right, so in this case, like, how do I explain it? I guess the depth of like the playbook for like a map on Mirage would more come from the individual players you have rather than the like tactical system or tactical structure you have for like overpass or like or different ways you get like map control and then how you set up the execute, right?
Yeah, I would agree. To have a good example of this, on my team last season, we didn't have the roster for 2 seasons consecutively. We had a couple of players that shifted, and what we were really good at doing before is just defaulting on Mirage, and that's because one of our guys that went A ramp every round was really good, no matter what kind of player he was facing, could find a pick at A.
Mm-hmm.
And a guy, our Palace guy that worked with him, they worked really well together in sync. They had really good communication, and I would just go B apartments with my op a lot of the time, and I would look for a pick if anyone's jump spotting. And we would just simply win rounds because those 2 guys at A or me at B apartments would just find something in the round, and then we just play off of that. Then I make a mid-round call. Whether we commit to those kills or not, that just determines how we're going to play the rest of that round out. And when we changed our roster around, we didn't have that player that was really good at ramp anymore, so we didn't have that same potential to just default out on Mirage, and so we kind of started banning Mirage a little bit more, just simply because we lost that one player.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that just kind of shows that the personnel, it's more about personnel on a map like Mirage than it is about your tactics. You don't really have to get too much map control on Mirage as you do other maps. It's not as integral to your success on the map. I mean, of course, it's important to get mid and connector sometimes and cat, but getting B apartments or Palace or A ramp, those are all just gifted to you as a T side, so you don't really have to worry about taking those with nades or anything like that.
Yeah, because basically there's this, I forget, I think it's an interview with HLTV. Dupree basically says like he basically says like beyond the entire structure, he believes like the reason Astralis right now is so successful is because they also have enough room for individual choice in that crew. So basically it creates like a gigantic depth to what they're doing in terms of like a playbook of like what of all the like different like pathways and like ways to break open a map, ways to take control, like because everybody gets some certain level of freedom. So you add that on top of their already like big playbook, it becomes this gigantic sort of like basically it's like a scene from what was it, like Infinity Wars, like there's like 14 million possibilities to go through, only one of them is going to stop fucking Astralis.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So
yeah. I guess you.
Yeah. So that's so in that sense, it's I guess this is a good way to transition to the next topic is, and you did kind of answer it, is like how does the playbook, how's it affected by the personnel you actually have? So for instance, like if you have less players, does that mean you have to have a more structured system? Because in a more structured system, they have like less, there's like more protocols than that in a more structured system, so they have less to focus on as they play inside the game, right?
Right. So personnel is kind of it's not as black and white as simply saying we have better players or worse players.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's just the comfort of players and other systems they've been in before, because what was surprising to me as an IGL is that sometimes the player I felt to be, for lack of a better term, the best, wasn't always the player that was most comfortable with a loose style of play. Sometimes they wanted the more structured play.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because their skill set of a player isn't always suited for aggression. Sometimes it's suited for passive play and responding.
Yeah.
But what helps that player out a lot is getting them into a position that they can be passive and they can do so effectively. So for example, this player that I'm talking about, he really liked when we got structured banana control. So for example, we had a couple ways that we got banana control on Inferno.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those was smoking halfway up so that it basically blocks off the car so an operator can't pick anyone through it. And then we would throw a Molotov to Molotov the corner, and then we would throw a pop flash so that if anyone's playing close right behind the half wall or the sandbags, they would get blind, and then our couple riflers can scale with that flash, and then we just leave our one of our star players there at banana, because what a lot of teams like to do is they, at least in the MDL level that we were playing at, they really like to re-aggress banana. They really like to try to take control of it back, but he knew basically every way that they would try to do that, and he knew how to respond to those plays and how to position himself so that he could frag them if they try to go back at him. So we still had to develop a playbook, and it was kind of around making sure that he got into a position that he was comfortable in, so that just seeing that response, he was able to play off of it. It wasn't like we could just run up banana loose and just frag them.
Yeah, it's like the difference between like Nico and like Cold Zero, right? Like Nico, you can just like let loose and he'll go kill somebody. With like Cold Zero, it's like you have to set up a system. You have to put him into these situations where like he'll kill everybody, but it has to be a very specific situation, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, get him into that spot that has already been opened up for him, and now he has space to work with and space to kind of read the opponents.
Okay, so I guess I can move on to the next question. My next one would be, how does the playbook differentiate from like the T side to the CT side? Like, because they're basically just two different games if you want to think about it. Like one's offense, one's defense. One's like they both have to deal with map control, but how you respond to like man down situations, as you pointed out earlier, is completely different, or how you deal with the economy is completely different, or like there's a bunch of different ways to go about it. So how do you build up that CT side playbook?
Okay, so for a CT side playbook, we'll have a handful of aggressive plays where we're basically not necessarily, well, some of them are targeting sections of a map, and some of them are a whole 5-man process. So some of our sectional plays would be like water control on overpass. If we've been getting screwed really hard because the other team is getting water control and just execing onto B because they have water control, we're going to fight for it. So that's not a 5-man play. That's more like a 3-man play. And the two guys at A can kind of do whatever they want. It helps the B guys even more if they try to fight for connector also, but that wasn't always there. I mean, if we made the same 5-man plays every single time, it'd become really predictable, and teams would be able to anti-strat us by just saying, oh, okay, they're having water control. That means there's no one at long A, so we're just going to run long A on overpass and just hightail it to A. So there's sectional plays like that, and there's also 5-man plays where we'll do like a mid-crunch on Inferno, or a mid-crunch on Nuke, or a lobby crunch on Nuke. So those plays would involve literally everyone. Everyone would be have a role, have a spot, and unless something was very spawn dependent, it was usually like, so a really gimmicky play we used for Nuke was that if we won pistol round and then the following anti-ecos, we would kind of do a free buy crunch is what we called it, and that would just be we buy 3 Molotovs, we Molotov ramp, hut, and the door, and basically the Molotovs are just a timing for us, because as soon as they expire, all of us flood all those spots together. So 2 guys ramp, 1 guy, and then 1 guy door, or 2 guys door, or sometimes we'd switch it with 2 hut, 1 door, something like that. So so that's like a 5-man play, but where CT side goes deeper than T side is that we have a lot of reactive plays as well. So like I was saying about banana on Inferno, we really get uncomfortable when we don't know what's going on at banana, or we don't know what's going on at bracket. So we'd have plays for retaking bracket, and we'd have plays for retaking banana, and usually all those involved though is a single pop flash. We don't really, there's some teams that have entire retake procedures for okay, we're going to throw a smoke that's going to be at the bottom of banana, we're going to throw a double Molotov that they both bounce off of the skybox, and then one lands at car, one lands a little farther back, and then we throw a pop flash also. But that just, honestly, that always kind of felt like a waste of utility to me, especially because sometimes you'll find out that no one's there, and then you just wasted so much utility to do that. So usually just a single pop flash and a confidence peak from your other players is really all it takes to just get that map control back. And you'll see a lot of teams do that at the highest levels, especially on Inferno. Just flash for bracket or flash for banana, and then 1 or 2 players will just peak with that flash. So,
all right,
so T side, you'll have maybe a late round exec for having less players. That'll just be to hit a bomb site. But for CT side, it's more about sectional plays.
So
like
because like I've always thought it was a bit strange to say like CT side is led by a specific like leader. Like, famous like MSL has always been criticized for his like lackluster CT sides or something, and I always thought that was more like due to his personnel than rather him necessarily as a leader. Though I guess you could criticize him for like taking certain positions or whatever that maybe suited a different player, but like if you're just talking about like this idea of like sectional sectional like playbooks where like it's really like the two players at A or the two players at B that are making the call, and then they have to like figure it out themselves. So it's always felt like on the CD side, it's always been more about like these small groups rather than like the entire pack, right? Is that a fair way to think about it?
Yeah. So what differs from team to team though can be how much just agency surrounds the IGL on these plays. I think some people I obviously don't know how North's comms are, but for my team last season, I had kind of what I would call a co-IGL especially he helped me out a lot for CT side because we'd always play on separate parts of the map. So basically, I would kind of call what my sectional defense is doing for it, and he would call what his sectional defense is doing, and we would basically respond based off of what's going on the map. There'd be a push and pull for the map, and if we got pushed on our side, he would push on that. I mean, we get pulled in.
Yeah, he pushes out. Yeah.
But if a team doesn't have what I like to call that co-IGL for CT side, then the weight's all on my shoulders, and I lost that player in the off season, and so when I moved into this new season, I didn't really have a teammate that stepped up like that immediately, and that really hurt my play. And what I could see being the case for a guy like MSL is that maybe he doesn't have a guy on his team that is consistently calling co-IGLing with him on CT side. So maybe he has to micro a little bit more, because that makes me or that main IGL have to look at the radar a lot more. And you don't really want to look at the radar as much as I was this season, or I assume MSL is at some points, because if you're microing everything that's happening, it's obviously going to hurt your own whatever it is you're doing.
Like basically, like in a sense, it's actually similar to StarCraft. Like if you're if the more you have to multitask, the worse you're actually doing, in a sense. Yeah. So, like basically, if you're putting yourself within that battle, you have to like focus on the battle. But because of like the way CS:GO works, like you like a second is just instant death sometimes. So you have to like really focus. But if you focus, obviously the entire like structure of the team falls apart. Right. So that makes sense. All right. So my next question is actually about layered strategies, I guess. So I guess a good way to explain this would be MSL again, because basically there's this thing that MSL did famously on Cobblestone. I'd call it like a blitzkrieg, but basically like he had like a 5-man tactic that set off within like the first 20 seconds and hit different parts of the map within those first 20 seconds. So it'd be like, okay, all 5 of us rush down mid. Oh, we have like some kind of B execute, or we have some kind of A execute, right? And basically, or like sometimes you have like an A wrap, sometimes you have a B wrap. Like that's kind of like what he does. So basically, the whole point of what I call the layer strategy is like by doing these in successive rounds, you're making sure you cannot be read. Or another way you think about it is you're kind of like manipulating the defense. So like, for instance, if he does like 3B executes, he knows by the 4th time he does it, like CT side is probably going to start stacking B if they kept losing. In this case, you run 5 down mid and they just take the round pretty easily, right? So how do you, is that something premeditated? Is that like a style, or is that like something, or is that just something you do in game? You're like, oh, okay, I think because of the way this game's going, you do this now.
For repeating strategies that are just quick and fast, some IGLs exercise the mindset that it's just run it till it loses, and that usually you can't get away with that at higher levels as much. But what's kind of dirty about that at I think the highest level is that you do expect the opposing team to adapt quicker than a lower level team, so you can throw more fakes off of it. I'm trying to think. There was definitely some other teams I saw. I think Optic, back when Stanislaw did it, he did a bunch of fast stuff, and then he would just like change it
mid round, right?
yeah. Throw the same nades, make it look like the same people are scaling, but then it's a fake. So he was really good at working with that too. What kind of is there anything more you're trying to know about that?
Oh, basically, is that something like you prepare when you're like building up this playbook? Like, oh, this strategy here, if you if you like you layer if you layer this strategy next to this strategy, it makes like both strategies better in a sense.
Okay, so that's
like okay. Here's how I explain it, because basically when I played StarCraft 2, there's this actual trick you can do as a Protoss player specifically, but it's technically possible as Terran or Zerg. Is you go is like I forget the exact build order, but the trick was you always open up the exact same, but because of the way the Protoss like tech tree works, you can always switch between like the three tech trees, which is Robobay, Stargate, or like Templar, which is like Dark Shrine or High Templar, right? And so, what a player could do, and it's been done before, is like you go into a specific group stage where you have this one build, but it branches off into like three different builds. And so you just use one build the first game, the second build the second game, third build the third game. By the time you get to the fourth game, the fourth guy who's been watching this entire thing has no idea what's going to happen, because even though you're using the same build, you're running off a different path.
Yeah.
And so what I'm asking is like, is that how like an IGL would think about it? Like, okay, we got this, like, we got this specific part of the map, and so now we have like different divergences of how we need to break open and take control of the round.
Yeah, with Cobblestone in particular, that definitely works better for other maps nowadays. I'm trying to think of a way that could work as well. I guess you could do it on Overpass, because you can kind of just YOLO towards B a lot, and you can also kind of just run through bathrooms if the other team's not expecting it. But that's just, I mean, that from MSL's perspective there, that's something that you have to play with a lot in matches, because if you do that in scrims, sometimes people adapt, sometimes they don't. Because scrims, people are trying to work on their own thing too. But if a team is trying to win as hard as they can against you, there's definitely a psychological warfare going on between him and the opposing IGL that he probably knows better than almost anyone. Just how that opposing IGL, or maybe the opposing players on a CT side, would respond to it. It's just that goes really deep, I'd say, in the CS world.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, like, your playbook's not only like the theoretical X's and O's, but sometimes it's just straight up like reading, I guess, the other guy's intentions of what they want to do when they want to do it, or like their tendencies, right? Like, is that what you mean?
Yeah, because you can. Okay, so I played a match this season where I ran the same strat I ran the same two strats, alternated them 7 times in a row, and we just dominated this team. And then the very last round of the half, I just said, hey, we're gonna make it look like we're running this strat, but instead it was on train, and instead 3 of us are gonna run through halls and just swarm the B bomb site, and only two of us are gonna go out with the nades that we're throwing that look like the same strat. And then it caught them off guard. They just stacked the A bomb site because we've been just hitting it over and over and over again. And so I kind of knew to do that by the very last round of a half. But MSL against pros, I know that would not work, because they would adjust faster. And I kind of figured, okay, by the 15th round they have to adjust, but MSL has to know by the 8th round they have to adjust, or the 7th round, because if he calls it and it's wrong, then he just loses a round, maybe gives a lot of economic advantage for the CTs at this point. So I just think I know what he's doing with this with these kind of plays. It's just when does he decide to make it a fake? Because you can run the same strat twice in a row in pro games. People do that sometimes, and because if the first time a pro team or a team didn't respond to that strat well at all, and the IGL has an inkling of a feeling that, okay, they don't even know what happened, we can run this again, then they'll do it. But after 2 times, I think, usually the other pro team has a good response for it, so you can't really run it a 3rd time.
Yeah.
But with lower level teams, you can run a strat a lot, because they don't know how to adapt. But pro teams should adapt after losing to a same strat twice, for sure. There's no way they should lose to the same strat the
yeah.
whole time. So
yeah, basically like that was like a problem Fallen had very early in his career. Like he had like he describes it as he had like the sickest fucking execute, but it would only guarantee him like one round because you played against a top team.
Yeah,
they'd figure it out by the second round.
Yeah, they know how to throw. I mean, if they see the same thing, usually the way to just counter a strategy is right click a smoke grenade and you just play around your own right click smoke grenade, and that's all you had to do, honestly.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So. All right. Here's a question, right? So, imagine, for instance, like Astralis Mirage. So imagine they take like mid control on the T side. I've noted in my notes. I've noted like they have like 4 different variations of how they want to do the A split. Is there a specific logic to like how you set up the A split, like in this very specific example, but like in a broader theoretical sense, like is it predicated on like knowledge of how the general defense likes to play, or how the meta is working, like generally where players prefer to play overall, or because like I'll give you examples. Basically, like the four deviations I have is like they have like 3 running up from connector, 2 from T-con, or they could have like 3 from connector, device holds from T-con with the op, and then Zitnix from Palace, or 2 from connector, 2 from T-con, and then Zitnix from Palace, or just Glaive from connector, 3 from T-con, and then Zitnix and Palace. Like a bunch of different variations, right?
Yeah. So. So at higher levels, I know that pros are frequently just anti-stratting each other. So I know they're just pick and choosing sometimes what they think based off of the opposing team's setup, what would work best. I mean, if I'm against FaZe, for example, I would probably run something that doesn't have just one guy at the T ramp, or if you call that T connector, the T ramp, because Rain tries to slot himself into that ramp a lot of the times.
Yeah.
That if you only send one guy there, Rain will just get that kill, and now he has ramp control. So I would probably send 2, 3, or 0 there. So I assume Astralis has that in mind when they're divvying out their numbers. But if they have a good feeling of the game and they've relayed the information to Glaive based off of how another team's playing, then I'm sure he can make a read that he feels is the best. Or another way to go about it is just that if they got mid control but one of their players died, or none of their players died, it's usually, I mean, 3 through the middle connector is really powerful. So they might just choose to do that because they have all this mid control and they feel for whatever reason that maybe the B apartments guy, depending on the team they're playing, might have aggressed at this point. So instead of trying to walk back from mid after they got control of that area, they might just say, okay, let's just hit it now. So that just might be a timing thing for them, because if you're against someone like Kerrigan at B, he tries to get slotted in B apartments a decent amount. So if you're playing against FaZe, I'd say he might already be flanking. So you kind of want to just hurry up and just do the split already, because you don't want to give Kerrigan or maybe Fur a chance to have walked through all of the B apartments or underpass and try to flank you at that point. So
okay, all right, makes sense. Okay, so we can move on. So we can get you can give me some concrete examples, basically, of something like the lower like NA teams, because he told me you played or you watched like Rogue, Ghost, Furia, One, like these types of teams, right? So it's an interesting sort of case study, I guess, because obviously these teams are up and coming. Rogue did make it to the major, obviously, but that's like but how do teams like this, like that are kind of struggling, not necessarily in the top field of their region, like how do they go about? I guess how the question would be like, how do they go about like building up towards international levels of success, right? Because like in the case of like Rogue, they do have like some veteran players, or like they might have some talent but not the experience, or they might have like the strategy but not the talent. Like how do they go about building up a map pool? Is it, or building up the strategy, or building up the tactics?
So I've talked a lot to MCE, who's the coach of Rogue. I actually rode with him in a car all the way from Tulsa to Oklahoma City, and I also did an Airbnb with him in Philadelphia, so I got to pick his mind a lot. And some of his comments about the way they built map pools kind of just seemed like if they just started on a map and it works, they're just kind of going to keep running with it. I remember hearing also on the Peaker's Advantage podcast, I think it was Daps, was talking about what they liked about Overpass and CT side on it, and he just kind of mentioned the fact that
it works.
It just feels good because we're all playing spots that kind of fit our play style, and that's just sometimes as much as it is. And it's kind of easy to get really good at a T side of a map, I'd say, if you're building from the ground up. But sometimes it just doesn't feel right ever on a CT side of a map, and so that's kind of how I at least built my map pool with my teams, and that's kind of what I feel like has been reiterated by other pros and IGLs and coaches, that they kind of just start with, is our CT side good on this map? Does it feel kind of natural? Is there natural chemistry? Is our players getting to play mostly their spots? Because I mean, the big fraggers always want to play connector on Mirage, or the big the Opera. I mean, there's certain spots on certain maps that are just hotter than other spots. And if too many people are vying for that spot and they're not comfortable with other spots, it just might never might never work out. So
yeah, so this is a good example, I guess, because we can transition to the big three, I guess, because you asked me for like specific examples, and the three teams I chose were among the top teams were Astralis, Na'Vi, and FaZe, because I think all three of them have very different ideas of how you're supposed to do this specific thing we're talking about, and obviously, Astralis lucked out because they have the greatest GM to have ever graced CSGO history, Kirby. So Kirby obviously sacrificed himself for the greater good of all of CS, and put Magisk into the roster. And as you pointed out, sometimes the chemistry is there, and apparently they have chemistry on all 7 maps.
That's how it feels.
That's how it feels. But I mean, I haven't seen them play Train, but on the other hand, nobody else plays Train, so. At least 6 maps, so probably 7, right?
It could be.
Could be,
it
right?
Probably is. They're probably still world class on every map.
Yeah, right. Like it's actually pretty disgusting how many wins they have on every fucking map. But
their nade work is just always on point. It just feels like they always have pop flashes for everything. Too,
yeah, like basically, like when I think of Astralis, like I actually think. You started out with a good point. Like their nade work is fucking fantastic, probably the best in the world. If like the only team I can think of that's close to them is Big, maybe, but it's like I still think Astralis is better, right? And so when I look at their structure, like the way I think about it, like the reason like Astralis is so much better than the other teams is because they do a bunch of one-way damage, right?
Yeah.
So, like, whether that's positional with, like, smokes and flashes, or whether that's straight up getting picks with, like, the HE nade stacks or a device as an opper or whatever. Like, basically, they do a shit ton of one-way damage where either one of two things happen. Either you're dead or you've been put into position that they clearly know is going to happen, and then they have, like, a counter for that by the time you actually hit the site. At least for the CT side, right? So, when we...
Yeah.
So how do you just like? I suppose the question I'd have for you with this Astralis team is like, actually I'm not even sure. Like basically, what do you think defines this team, right?
I think.
Go ahead.
I think it is what you're talking about. The one-way damage is huge. When I was taking notes before this about FaZe, Astralis, Na'Vi, I was always noticing that. Astralis at the beginning of rounds, it's not like they're really giving a fair duel to the opposing team, and what I think Astralis keyed in on over really any other team is the first kill statistic, and because Device has been just a complete machine during the beginning of every round with his once he gets an op on CT side, it's like he'll find a pick. I want to say it's something like 30% of the rounds is based off of him at least taking a duel, and he wins those duels some astronomical amount of the time, like 87%. It's just crazy, and that's not something any. The only other opper I see at events that has numbers like that is Cadian for Rogue, and I'm pretty sure he's just copying Device. That's why he's doing that. So,
I mean, that's not a bad player to copy.
Yeah, no, of course not. But it's been something that I don't think Device used to do as much, and lately he's been just so enabled. And because I would watch old Device demos, and he kind of isn't that flashy, doesn't always get the opening pick, but usually stays alive and kind of just is there till the end. And now it's nearly every round he's doing something with that op within the first 30 seconds of the round, at the longest. I think he's usually even faster than that. He'll just take the duels that are generally favored for oppers early on, and he has quite a few plays on every map that are just. It's hard as a T side to want to use nades literally everywhere you go just to prevent that opening pick. So Device, he keeps you guessing a little bit, or sometimes he doesn't even care and he just he peeks the same thing he peeked in the same previous round, and you just kind of have to hope he's not going to do that.
Yeah, like
so,
because
like Car at Banana, he'll peek that maybe the first time he gets an op. Sometimes he'll go to mid the next round, but sometimes he'll just go to Car again, and it's like you said with MSL and these StarCraft players, they how they have these different. I mean.
Different opening gamut, right?
Yeah. You don't know it's going to be a nade stack towards logs, or it's going to be Device picking down, or it's going to be a nade stack down mid, or it's going to be Device picking down with an op, or is Device going to be in apartments, or are they going to do a flash play so that someone could peek the window or something in apartment? They have so much just plays for the opening of a round, and they have plays for later in the round too. And they're just so quick on those things that it just you can't stop everything. Always.
Yeah, he has a lot of fucking plays Device does. Because the other way I might have been able to define like Astralis is like basically the only player on that team that really feels like they have a lot of freedom is Device. Because specifically only on the op though, like if you put him on a rifle, like he's good, but they don't necessarily like build the team around him. Whereas with the op, they've clearly built the team around him, right? And it becomes like very hard to cut. The problem with like dealing with Device is like I think he's kind of understood like he's kind of added just enough negative EV to make all the other moves he makes even a higher percentage. So I mean by that is like so there's like I don't necessarily know if it's like some kind of maxim or something, but basically the idea in MMA is you always have to throw one elbow in your life when you're on the map, and the reason you have to throw this one elbow, like even though it's like a dirty play, is because you have to make everybody else in the world respect the fact that you might just do this like really stupid dirty play, right? And so right, and so like Device, he rarely does it, but when he does do it, like it completely catches people off guard. Then the rest of the game or tournament or whatever, they have to respect the fact that maybe he will do this like ridiculous like stupid play that's completely out of his playbook. And because of that, like every other move he makes is all of a sudden way more effective. Right. So that's a good way to put it. Yeah, it's always a very dangerous thing about Device. And the fact is, like, he doesn't even necessarily have to get the kill, because like you explained, like if you want to like clear out Device safely, you're gonna have to use a lot of nades, and then those are nades you're not getting back, obviously. Yeah. So it's a very dangerous like I do think like Astralis get the most one-way damage of any team I've ever seen. Like even in the cases of like when FaZe was super dominant, at least in those like aim duels they kept taking, there was technically a chance like the other team could have swung it their way. Whereas like I look at this, like it didn't matter how good their skill was. Like it's just like a one-way window for Astralis to take them out. Yeah. Right. So,
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Right. Like fucking Astralis gonna win the major. Probably, most likely. I'll give them a like 90% chance or something. So
winning the major?
Yeah, winning. I guess not 90%. That's like ridiculous, but like 70%, 60%. I think that's fair.
I actually.
All right.
I actually thought about this before getting on here, and I thought about just the way you could abuse Astralis. Okay. And
how do you kill Astralis?
How do you kill them? Is well, they play the thing about them is that I feel like it's almost like you sometimes have to just know you need to play with Astralis in mind that you have a 4v5. Like you need to have a lot of strats that revolve around that, because once Astralis get a 4v5, they tend to play very standard, and as you shouldn't take any more unnecessary risks once you have that 5v4 advantage. So I think if a team comes into the major preparing to only have 4 players every round, they actually are going to have a much better game plan than a team that just thinks more standard 5v5. And it's ridiculous as it is. I think it's one of the only ways you can prepare a T side against them, because I think you have to just live with the fact you're going to get picked, or you're going to take a lot of damage, and some players are either going to have 30 health at the beginning of the round or are going to be straight up dead because Device picks them. So and there are a lot of strats that teams use for having 4 players alive, and they aren't that different, but you just need to have total confidence in them, and understand that Astralis, despite being as great as they are, their setups aren't impenetrable. And I think Cloud9 at the E-League Premier actually kind of exposed that Device was getting opening picks a lot, but Cloud9 just kind of stuck with whatever their plan was, and with 4 alive could still get into a bomb site. It's not impossible. So I don't know. I think that's just something that that's how I would prepare for it.
Yeah, because they don't really make gambles, do they? When they're up, so
right. They just play really set 2-3.
Yeah, but they probably should at some point. Like I said, you have to sometimes throw the fucking elbow so people respect it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, one round. I remember they threw this round, but it was also against Cloud9. Is that I think it was Zipnix was in apartments, and they had 3 pressuring Banana. Device took a pick towards mid. They got the opening pick at Banana, but Device got shot by Skadoodle, and then Zipnix just kept pushing apartments, and then it was a 4v3 Cloud9 advantage, and it was kind of like really surprising that they didn't play standard, but it's because Device was one of the players that wasn't in that 3 group, so he took the liberty of just saying, okay, I'm just gonna keep playing star player, even though he shouldn't have at that point. So
I mean, that's a rare gaffe from him, but like
that was super rare. Yeah, that was I don't see that very often, honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right, so this is actually a great transition, because there is one team here that could technically specialize in a 4v5, Navi. Because if there's any player you're willing to sacrifice to get into play, it could be Zeus, and you wouldn't necessarily miss him as much.
Zeus or
Edward. They could either of them could die and be like, Navi's still straight fire. He's still got electronic.
Yeah.
Simple flamey on the train, right? So this is a very different team from Astralis in the sense that the way I look at them, the way their playbook pans out in terms of the CT side and T side, it's like you have to enable their 2 star players, Simple and Electronic. Is that like a fair description of what they do?
I would say so. Sometimes they oddly focus on flamey in certain games, and I don't feel like they usually have as much success when they do that. But yeah, it's usually, like you saying, Electronic and Simple.
Right, because like this team has like a very like super stylistic approach. Same as with all the Zeus teams, basically, like take map control, run down the clock, execute at the very end, right? Yeah. But in this case with Navi, they also have like Simple with the going out getting picks. Start of the round on both sides of the map. So
yeah,
right. So all right, tell me then, how would you kill Navi?
How would you? Just save nades.
Save nades.
I mean, just always save a smoke grenade. At least one person on a bomb site, just have a smoke grenade, because if he does something too late, if the call is too late, I don't know if this is Gambit would have been affected more by this, because I remember they used to throw execs at 20 seconds left, which was just crazy to me. Navi doesn't do it as slowly as them, because sometimes they'll go into a contact play into a bomb site, and if you're saving nades and you get hit by a contact play, you're
screwed.
That nade's kind of that nade's useless. So yeah, I think he trusts those plays a little more with this lineup.
Yeah, the contact plays. I mean, he does have electronics, so it makes sense.
Yeah, I guess it's. I don't know. That's playing against Navi seems. I mean, for Navi, it's more of can you withstand, I guess, their T side, and for Astralis, it's can you
survive CT side?
Yeah. So the thing is, Astralis has a great T side too. So you can't. I mean,
their CT side is like they're going like 10-5, 13-2 every like game. It's like, come on, it's too much. Right. Okay. Because the way I've been thinking about Navi is like I actually think you have to you basically have to perfect the anti-force buy if you want to kill Navi.
Also, you have to beat FaZe. You should do that.
Yeah, same thing with FaZe. Actually, they both have the same weakness, but I'm not even sure if it's a weakness because they win them so often. Yeah. But like you have to figure out a way to like stop their force buy, because I feel like both teams are way more reliable to do the force buy, and then you get more rounds that way.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's like if there was like it's not actually a tactic. It's more like an overall strategy. Like, okay, this team's more likely to force buy. How are you gonna control that, right?
Astralis have a good way of dealing with force buys. That is probably why they're the best right now. Also, they almost just treat them like they're gun rounds. Even though they know the other team's probably forcing, they'll still take banana control with nades and just have a guy posted. I mean, it doesn't look all too much different, and they'll take fights as if they're against guns sometimes, even though they're against CCs and deagles. So
yeah, actually, I may as well ask this because this is like a really funny sort of mindset I've seen. But basically, people simultaneously like explain, like players specifically, they'll say something like, man, these goddamn pistols are so overpowered. These force buys are so overpowered. This shit is like ridiculous. But at the same time, when I see them play in the game against these force buys, they don't necessarily give them the respect that's due. They're like, we're not going to play standard. We're not going to clear out the areas of the nades. We're not going to like force them. We're not going to hamstring them. Right? We're just they just give them the straight up aim duels, and they're like, oh man, that fucking pistol was bullshit.
I know. It's the way, you could just throw the same nades you throw against a gun round. But the thing is that when you're playing against a force buy, a lot of players... So let's say you win round 1, and then you have to win against a force buy round 2. A lot of people will buy M4 and no utility, just armor. Mm-hmm. And even pros will just buy M4, armor, flashbang, or something. And it's like, okay, you just really gave yourself a lot fewer opportunities, or just ways to get map control or information. And you can forego utility sometimes, but if you forego information and utility, which sometimes happens if you don't have, because you don't want to just run into pistols ever. So if you just have your guns, you kind of if you're against a gun round, you might make an aggressive play somewhere, but you don't want to just run into pistols and die to pistols, because that just feels infinitely worse than if you just waited for them and they made a bad play and try to converge on something and you just mow them down. So I like when I see teams just more often buy whatever their SMG of choice is in full utility, because then they can run kind of their gun round plays, get map control or information, and then just play off of it like that. So yeah, because like I've always found that like very funny. Like simultaneously they're complaining about it's so overpowered, but they don't necessarily play the best way against it. Right. Yeah, you can still get one deed at any given point, unless you're flashing them or smoking them off.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I guess when we look at like actually I don't know if necessarily Astralis is a good example. Maybe the older Astralis might be a better example, but like, is there like how does like a playbook or like the leader, the strategy, like how does it come, like how does it play out in the map pool, right? Like, because we talked about earlier, like if you happen to have like the right 5 guys, like in the case of Astralis, you get all the good CT sides, and then you can build up the T side. But on the other hand, like you look at in general the leaders, like they always have like a specific map or a specific way they like to play the game that comes out on their T side. So like in MSL's case, he was always like really good on Cobblestone, always really good on Mirage, always kept going to there. And in like Fallen's case, I actually think he was probably best on probably Overpass and Train, historically speaking. Obviously those kind of went to the wayside the further into the modern era we go to. So like there's clearly some kind of correlation between like the leader and the T sides, and then the map pool, and then how like the map, how it's like refracted to the map pool. Like how do you see it?
When I think of map pool, I think of just personnel and fit, and also picking to not give your opponent their best map. Usually, I think that's usually all. There's definitely some deeper mind games for some teams about map pool, but it's more or less, at least for the pick ban stage, it's just either ban your permaban or ban your opponent's best map, and then if it's a BO3 at least, and then pick what's your best map. But if you're, are you talking about as like the meta of it, or
okay. Whichever way. Like I guess we could talk about map pick theory, because like there's generally just two schools of thought. I think there's either the absolutists, like MSL is like, okay, we're always gonna go to this map no matter what. Fuck everything. We're always gonna go to this map because that's our best map. And then there's like the relativist, which is more like Kerrigan's style, I guess, where it's like, oh, you pick your relative strength against the relative weakness.
Right. I think you nailed it right there. I think that's usually how people go about it. It's for how Fallen has been picking though. I know when they incorporated Stewie that they actually weren't. I mean, maybe they won't. I don't know if they would ever admit this, but they clearly weren't playing to win in a lot of the tournaments that they played. They were playing for practice, and you could tell because of their setups where Cold Zero would play A with Stewie, and he doesn't play A anymore.
Yeah.
He plays B. So there was times when they would, and they did that. Like I saw Fallen would pair Stewie with Cold Zero for a tournament, and then he would pair Stewie with another player for a tournament, and they would just kind of. I think that's just so they can learn English or something. I don't know.
Learn English in the fucking trenches. I guess that's one way to do it. Like,
I don't think they'll. I don't know if they're gonna come out and say that they're just trying to learn English, but they clearly weren't playing to their absolute strengths in some of the tournaments, and I think that their map picks might have reflected that. And I think this whole MIBR Stewie Tarek project that they're undergoing right now might be just like saving. It's one of those like saving strats for TI, saving strats for the major kind of things.
I mean, they also had they also like kicked out like the guy. They kicked out bullets for Tarek, so whatever save strats they had, they're probably out the window too, because like it's a different player, right?
We actually scrimmed MIBR like one time, and I think they are pretty good at coordinating things now.
They're better.
They might just be a lot better than us too.
Could be that too. Don't really know, but yeah. What do you think? I guess I may as well ask you. What do you think of MIBR? Like, because when I look at this team, I guess like when I look at the lineup, the personnel, I actually think they should play more like Cloud9 at the major, or like the first version of Phelps, where like they first brought him in and they had like Phelps and Fer go ham.
Yeah.
Right? Where before like Phelps became like chained, basically. So I think that's how they should have played it. But like you look at the way they, it's not a particular large sample size. I think it was just like one tournament where like I saw them at was like they played more like old SK, and I don't necessarily think they have the roster to do that.
Yeah, I don't think anyone you would classify on that team as a support player anymore. I think. I mean, I guess Cold could kind of do it.
No, he plays like similar roles, but he like demands resources, right?
Yeah, you don't really want him to do that. And you could just unleash Stewie and Fer in the beginning of rounds, and Tarek's like a great second man in, also, or even fourth man in at times. I mean, they could play a lot looser. It's just that if they have to just be on the same page, which is really what a lot of Counter-Strike is at that highest level. Is
it's not necessarily
the CT side. Yeah, just knowing what's going on both sides of the map, playing that push and pull, and not. You want to let Stewie and Fer, and really any of them, do exactly what they want to do, but to an extent.
But there's like not enough space. That's like my contention there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There's not enough space to unleash everyone on that team right now. So I don't know if you pick and choose certain rounds or certain plays, or Fallen just calls it every time. It's just up to.
But, I mean, there's no consistency if you like switch. If you like each player like do it a little bit. So.
Right.
Like it's hard to build a team around that. Like, oh, you got to go off this time. You got to go off this time. You got to go off this time. Right. So it's a bit.
I think Fallen is smart enough though to kind of be the point guard in a sense that he can kind of enable his players, give him the ball on a certain round. Is what he could do, as he can read the pace of the game well enough that, like, let's say he gives the ball to Tarek or not to Stewie or Fur, you can kind of expect for Stewie it's really early round. For Fur it's kind of like he'll just walk into something after a while. But if he gives the ball to himself, that's going to be an opening off pick. I mean he would not.
I don't think he'd ever give like the ball to himself anymore, right?
No, he doesn't really do that anymore.
Like he gave it up. Like if I had to guess, it's because I think he specifically needed an FNX type of player, and like they lost that player, and FNX himself can't even find FNX anymore. So
yeah, but everything FNX has done has been kind of disappointing for a while.
Yeah, he kicked out of his own team even, so it's a rough world out there. All right, I guess we went a little bit off topic, but the final team is the third extreme, which is FaZe. Super loose. Yeah. Basically, the way I describe them is like very basic structure, and then from what I can tell, Kerrigan's like, Nico, Guardian, one of you go out and make a play, and then whatever happens, whether you get a pick or whether you get information, I will call an entire tactic around that. Is that like a fair way to call the FaZe roster?
Yeah, I mean they're sometimes really too default centric. I think. I wish there was a little more structure to what they were doing, but I mean it's been getting them into the semifinals, finals of nearly every tournament, except for the E-League Premier, which was kind of a sad showing for them. But it was their first time with Olaf back.
Yeah,
I think,
yeah,
right?
first time with Olaf. They were on vacation. Some of them were on vacation before that tournament too. Like, okay, so this.
There's excuses.
Yeah. So basically, here's my question, because this is like the most extreme example of a team I could think of, where I think their entire style doesn't necessarily fall from Kerrigan. I actually think it falls from their personalities on that team. Like, if you think about Nico basically did an interview. He's like, yeah, we go to every event, and the reason we go to every event is because we think live matches are the best practice. Whereas like Astralis is far more structured. They have a more regimented schedule, and so like everybody's criticizing them, is like, man, why don't you guys get more structure? Why don't you guys add more depth to the playbook? But I literally think it's not possible with the personalities they have to do that.
I think you can level any team, but it's difficult if a team like Astralis all buys in. I haven't talked to them, but I'm assuming they buy into this team is going to be the best in the world if we all do our part to make it the best team in the world. FaZe, on the other hand, thinks that if they elevate themselves individually, they can all be the best players in the world, which in turn should make them the best team in the world. But that's just simply not how it works in the Counter-Strike world.
I mean, it did work for them for like 2 months, so maybe they're like, oh, maybe we'll go back. Yeah. Maybe we'll go back. Yeah. But no, I don't think it's possible, right? So.
No. I think their philosophy might be just wrong.
Just straight up wrong. Like,
yeah, simply put.
For a brief moment of time, it did look like they were about to fucking break the game. So props to them for that. But like,
right.
Yeah, like, because like when I look at them, like in terms of like the playbook, in terms of like the T side, I don't necessarily see like super deep shit from them necessarily. But to be fair, like they also had like 2 fucking stand-ins, and then for like 3 months, and then Olaf Meister just came back. But even when I look at this team and then look at like the previous iterations of FaZe, it felt like those had like more structure to them, more playbook, more of that stuff. So I do think in some level it does come down to like the personality of the players on that team, right? And so my question was actually going to be like, how does like personality function into like the overall team dynamic, or the overall team like idea of how to approach the game?
Yeah. Okay. So I I'd say it's usually pretty consensus based. So it's as an IGL, you usually want to bring some semblance of structure, but sometimes you just don't if you just see that your team can be as incredible as they are when they play the way the individuals want to play. And I think the whole it is their personalities. It is just they're they clearly think that if they play the way they keep playing with individual centered play, it's gonna work for them. When I've been on teams before, sometimes I'll read a team and I'll just so I played like a bunch of different divisions as I was moving up, and sometimes I'll just know, okay, this is pretty much one of the most skilled rosters in our division, so we can just play as loose as we want. And I don't know if you know how like the RWS system works for ESEA, but it's like if you just pug, if you play pugs, just like their matchmaking system, you gain a bunch of RWS if you have high impact in your pugs, and that just shows on your profile. And the highest RWS players usually are super mechanically strong and talented. And if I just kind of look at another team, and I look at our team, and I look at their pug stats for a month, or for the last couple months, and I look at ours, and if ours are just simply way higher, then I'm just going to think we can just kind of run over them if we just play however we want to play. And I think that's how FaZe kind of sometimes looks at other teams that they play. They just say, I mean, like, we have Nico, we have Guardian, we have
Olaf, we have
Olaf,
Rain.
yeah, and like, is there really a team that can hang with us? And that's just sometimes. I mean, I think it is what got them to be as good as they were for that couple month span. But I think the rest of the world has kind of caught up to them, and I don't think any team had as much coordination and teamwork and just overall shared philosophy as the
Astralis guys.
Today's Astralis. Yeah, today's Astralis.
Yeah, basically like they're all on the same page and they all have the best roles they can play as individuals, which is extremely rare. I can't think of the last time that happened until like, I guess, Luminosity Gaming with FNX and Taco, I guess, would be like the... But even then, Taco didn't want to play the roles he wanted. So I guess it'd have to go back farther, like Fnatic or some shit.
I don't even...
That team itself wasn't necessarily like them playing all the roles they wanted either. Like, this is a pretty rare team, actually.
Yeah, I think this Astralis team is like, finally we're seeing like the San Antonio Spurs ideology coming into esports.
Alright, so everybody's playing the specific role that elevates them, and then like the entire thing's just going better and better and better. Like, it's fucking unstoppable, it feels like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Alright, so I think that about covers it. But I guess since you're here, I may as well ask you, what are your major predictions? Specifically, who's going to be the top 4? And who's going to be the winner?
Let me look at it briefly. I would say... I mean, off the top of my head, I can just say...
Astralis
is top 4. Let me look at an upcoming FACEIT Major. Okay, so... I think my top 4 is... VP, Windstrike... No, I'm just kidding.
Bottom 4?
Yeah. I'll start with the qualifier, I guess, who I think is gonna...
Alright. Who's gonna survive?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, who's gonna survive? So it's 8 of these teams, right?
Yeah.
So the new challengers, Boston's Fallen. Okay, clearly Astralis is one of those. Liquid is gonna be one. I think Big is a third. I'd say Gambit have looked questionable. Vega, I don't even know what's happened with them. Space Soldiers have looked good, so I probably put them up there. I would say North should be in this top 5, but they just made that change with Nico, so I don't...
Here's the thing. I'd probably go with them, but like, the reason being, like, they weren't good with Mertz anyway, and I do know Nico's like a good rifler, and it's not like MSL's been fucking great using an op anyway, so it's like, I think it could work.
Right. Yeah, I agree. But then 3 more teams.
It's rough, right?
I'd want to say Nip, but I think Optic's just better than them, so I'd say Optic before Nip.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's really honestly tough. It's the last 2 spots. If I had to gun to my head, who would I pick? I would say Hellraisers and Tyloo. I'd say Hellraisers and that. Yeah, I guess. Tyloo is such a flux pick though. That could be nearly.
Tyloo is hilarious. Like when I looked at them, I was like, wait, this team like has skill, it has tactics, but has like almost no teamwork.
Yeah, every time I watch them, I'm like, how does this setup working? It's just like sometimes.
Oh my god, their train setup is so funny to me.
I don't know. It doesn't seem like they are really playing off each other as well as other teams, but it works for them. And I think it just catches. I think your game sense when you play Tyloo just has to turn off a little bit, just a little, just like you're if one guy is in a certain spot, and that usually indicates that he's playing a cross with another guy at a certain spot, and sometimes they're just not there.
Of course not. It's like Tyloo is hilarious. I actually have them as a. I think they're my dark horse pick to make to the Legends because they're like I don't think like you can watch their VODs. You can even like scream like whoever's screaming against them will probably have like an advantage against them. But for everybody else, it'll be like, what even is this team?
Right, exactly. That's how I feel when I watch them.
Like
it's just like I'll watch entry fraggers come out in just a VOD or something, or just against them, and then it's just like, okay, yes, this guy should. And then I look at the X-ray and I'm like, what? Like I'm just a little confused by where a person is, and I'm just yeah.
Like this is actually why I like this version of Tyloo better than the last one, because the last one didn't like fucking like surprise you. This one like almost always surprises you. Like I've seen a bunch of the games like, why are you doing this again? Like, or what even is this with this particular team? So they're very surprise oddball team, and like. Mm-hmm. Like if I had to give them like fucking like a statistics of like of their skill, their team play, their stat, and like their tactics, I'd be like, oh yeah, they're probably like skill wise, I think they're pretty up there, like 7 or 8. Tactics would be like 6, 7 ish, but like their team play is like almost 0. It's so weird.
Yeah, I think Benta is, I'd say, a top 7 player in the world though, right now.
See, actually, I actually think like this is like the time for Bentent to get out of Tyloo because he speaks English, right? Like just do a good showing here, talk to them English teams in English, then get bought out.
Yeah,
right. I think it's a time for him to get out because he does speak English as far as I know. So, but yeah. Basically, I have similar picks except I have Astralis, Liquid, North, Big. Optic, and then I went for like a bunch of like gambly ones. I think because like Tyloo was on one of them. I went with Gambit because I'm betting on the fact that the continuous failures ever since Zeus left has weathered down the core of these players, and they will accept Blade as their one true god leader, and he will raise them from the ashes. That's my bet. Right. Because like
hopefully, like
in terms of raw skill, they're like one of the best. They're like incredibly skilled. Like in terms of like raw potential skill.
Yeah, I love their player. I think Adren is so good. Hobbit is obviously incredible too, and Mo kind of has ups and downs, but Mirror is not bad either.
Yeah, it's like Mo's like a serviceable like structural opper, I guess is the best way to put it. Mm-hmm. And like fucking Adren's like smart as hell if as long as he's not the in-game leader. So just
yeah.
So in terms of the potential on this team, I think it's pretty great, even though they've clearly squandered it all ever since Zeus left.
Yeah, they haven't shown really anything.
Yeah, and then after that, who the fuck knows? Like, do I really want to bet on Renegades? Who's like, who like Nifty is basically like, yeah, these are the most human humans I've ever played with. And I'm like, oh my god, that's like that explains so much about this team because they always fall under the pressure of like these big events. Do I want to bet on Hellraisers, who I've barely seen? Like, do I want to bet on Nip? And then here's the thing: like, Nip only made it through to the qualifiers, as far as I can tell, because choked up a little bit, but also because like Get Right and Force like returned at the very last moment to save them. So I was like, oh, do I really want to bet on those guys? It's hard. It's pretty hard.
What do you think of the America's minor teams?
I think Energy is better than all of them. I think
they are.
I think Energy is like should clearly be here, but obviously they choked. All right,
Yeah.
so America Minors. Let's see here.
Just complexity in Rogue. Really.
Yeah, like if I look at, feel Rogue is sort of weird to me, I guess, in the sense like I can't really figure out how, basically when I look at the team, like there's a bunch of like, as far as I can tell, it's basically like 4 veterans and Vice, right? Because like even though like Sick hasn't really been at the top level, he's been playing for a while. Rick A is pretty good. Kadian has been playing for a while. Obviously, he's been kicked out from Denmark to go in exile. Mm-hmm. And Hiko, I thought, was supposed to like retire 2 years ago or something.
Yeah.
But like he's still playing. So like I have questions about Hiko. Like, if you weren't going to retire, shouldn't he have like, well, whatever. But basically, like when I look at the teams, like okay, yeah, it makes a lot of sense why they made it here because they have more experience than at like majors, I guess. If you just count Hiko alone compared to a bunch of the other guys. Yeah. So it does make sense, but like it's hard for me to see. Like I saw their games and I wasn't necessarily that impressed by them.
Right.
But like it really comes down. And here's the thing: I didn't actually watch enough of their games to know their like map pool, their tactics, or any of that. So I think it's going to straight up come down to like individual play for this particular team, and I think Cadian's a bit underrated because the fact that he lost the 1v1 a billion years ago. So yeah. I think he's better than people give him credit for. I think Rick A is pretty good. I think I saw some decent stuff from Hiko and Sick, but like it's hard for me to like necessarily bet on that. So that's why I didn't pick them. As for Cole, I really don't want to bet on them because like when I looked at the fucking minor, the guys who went off was like Android and Ye, and like those are like guys who've never been to this level as far as I know. Yeah. So there's no way I can bet on those two. Like, because I thought they were their best players. Like, if your best players are like completely new at this level, why would I bet on them? Like, the pressure is probably going to be too much.
Yeah, I think the pressure is like Ye actually was at Fragadelphia and he won the MVP. Mm-hmm. Played for Soul Patrol at it, but he's a mega confidence player. And if it's against, I don't think you can be a mega confidence player if you're playing against Astralis and Liquid and Space Soldiers even, and just some of these other teams. It's just there's going to be players on the other team with more confidence than you, and they can shoot back a little better than everyone that you've been playing against lately.
Yeah.
And that's something that he's going to have a hard time running into, I'd say.
Yeah, but I will say like I it's a good result for both teams. I just don't really like. Here's the thing about the minor though, like just because of the way the format works. It's technically possible for either of them to make it, depending on the draw. But, like, especially in Complexity's case, like, their win condition is based off of, like, a completely inexperienced I don't necessarily know if they're star players because I don't watch enough of their games, but the 2 players that I thought got them through the minor were Android and Ye, and they're completely new at this level as far as I know. So
yeah, Ye's I'd say Ye's
completely
definitely
new,
their
right?
Star player, and he's really new. He played... Just a couple seasons ago, he was playing like ESEA main in the same division I was in, and it was just like, and then after that he got picked up to Complexity because he was the best player in that division. But that doesn't mean he's, a top pro.
Doesn't mean anything. Yeah, he just got to the foot of the mountain, I guess. Like he got past the the town on the hill, and now has to climb up the fucking mountain. And the mountain's like fucking humongous.
Yeah, exactly. It's so much different at the international level. Ye was the best player at Fragadelphia, but he's probably, honestly, I don't know, like bottom 25 players at this minor. So
I mean, there's Zeus here, so I think there's hope.
There's some teams we haven't. Yeah, there's some teams that we haven't mentioned for reasons too. Yeah, so I guess they.
But yeah, like basically, if you're one of your best players that experience, I can't bet on them. So that's how I look at it anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
To move forward, top 4 teams of the entire
event
tournament. Looking at it now, I'd say.
I mean, I think the 3 of them are pretty obvious.
Yeah. Okay. Astralis, Navi, FaZe are definitely top 3. The 4th team, it's just going to come down to who prepares the best, and I think that could be one of probably 3 teams, and it's probably Liquid, MIBR, Mouse Sports, and then
maybe Fnatic. I think Fnatic could take out Mouse Sports if they happen to run head-to-head or something.
Yeah, I think that's a good matchup for them. So yeah, they could do that. Also, well, Fnatic beat FaZe at E-League, but that was again a pretty weak FaZe.
Yeah.
So I think Fnatic is probably the best bet. The only problem I have with Fnatic is their playstyle is so
obvious.
Yeah, it's so one-dimensional that it's really hard to get through a big tournament like this without getting just countered. So, but then again, I thought that would happen earlier to them, and it didn't, I guess.
I mean, it kind of did and kind of didn't. Like,
yeah, they don't really have good like tournament runs anymore. It was like, what is it? They won that one. Was it DreamHack? What was it before WESG? They won.
It was like I am World Championship. I am Katowice, I think. Like it's the one where they beat FaZe, right? Where like basically Flusha literally came into the finals of the DeLorean. It's like, I'm back, boys, from 2015. Like, oh shit, I haven't seen you in ages. And then he wins. Like, oh come on, man, what you gotta do?
Yeah. So I'm kind of hesitant to put Fnatic there. So just for the sake of just like gambling a little bit, I guess I would put MIBR as my fourth team.
Yeah.
But that's just hoping that they pull it all together by the time that this major comes around, which I think they have a good shot of doing.
Yeah, because like I'd probably just go with a safe pick, go with Liquid. I think I think like their only bad matchup is Astralis. So, I mean that obviously means they can literally not win this major because Astralis is going to probably be in the finals. But beyond that, they could beat most other teams.
Yeah, I think Liquid's a really safe pick too. I think that's
Yeah. All right. So do you have a dark horse pick like me, like Tyloo? Like I think Tyloo's gonna make the fucking legend stage because nobody's gonna see them coming.
So a dark horse to get top 4
or
top
8,
get legends?
Just legends.
Top 8.
Yeah, like that makes the field a bit easier to look at because like top 4 is like we already named them. So
yeah. A dark horse to make top 8, I guess. Maybe big. I
mean,
they always seem. I mean, they've seemed relatively impressive, and I think they prepare really well. So I think that goes, and for majors that goes a long way. I mean, that's seemingly why Gambit did so well. It's as long as big don't.
I mean, Gambit did also have like the worst boot camp of all time, according to them. Right.
According to them, but then you look at their hours, and they had like 120 hours in the past 2 weeks, which no team was even close to. So if it's whatever team, okay, my dark horse is whatever team in the on their Steam profiles, whatever has a combined 600 hours. 600 hours. Yeah. If any team has like 120 average in the last 2 weeks, that team is making top 8 for sure. That's just all it takes. This game is so grind intensive that you have to be on point with tactics and mechanical skill. And if you're on with both, you're gonna make top 8 in a major.
Okay. All right. To close it out, I guess you should probably give a shout out to your YouTube, to your Twitter.
Okay. Yeah. So my everything is Mauisnake, MAUISNAKE. I'm sure it's gonna be in the YouTube description. And I have Twitch, YouTube, and Twitter. In order of what you should follow, just follow my Twitter first. But my YouTube content's going to be coming out. I just think my YouTube's a little more self-sufficient than everything else. So Twitch, I think I get a good amount of followers because I post when I cast on HLTV, and that usually gets me a lot of followers every time I do that. So just follow my Twitter because Twitter clout seems pretty important in this industry. So yeah.
All right. See you guys later.